Hi, my name is Jeremy Singleton, 5-time All-American long jumper from Tarleton State University. Today we're going to talk about long jump and the phases. First of all, you need to warm up with your speed development. This includes things like high knees and quick feet. Then we'll transition into standing long jumps. Then we'll move into first phase long jump, second phase long jump, talk about the approach, and then finally the full jump. Okay, you're going to need to practice your high knees, which is basically getting your knees up and driving them up in the air. Keep your chin level, pump your arms, kicking back your elbows, and then work your dorsiflex and your plantar flex. Okay, dorsiflex and plantar flex. What does that mean and how to do it? Alright, dorsiflex is when you're running and on your way up, your toe is pointed towards your knee. Okay, so not pointing down, your toe is pointing up, driving up as you drive. Plantar flex is on the way down. As you strike the ground, you're on your toes, and you're plantar flexing towards the ground on your tiptoes. So the cycle goes plantar flex on the way up to the knee drive to the dorsal flex. Okay, next is going to be the butt kicks. You're going to slightly lean forward, still working the back of your elbows, pointing them towards behind your shoulders, and you're going to make your heels hit your butt in repetitive motion, making the audible sound of connecting your heel to your bottom. The second thing is going to be the high knee heel to butt, which is kind of like a marching high knees. So you're going to lean back, you're going to bring the heel to your butt all the way up, and then forward is a high knee. Following that, you're going to work your A skips, your B skips, and your C skips. What's important on those is to continue to dorsiflex and plantar flex, but also hitting that knee up as high as you can, touching your shoulders on all phases. On the B skips, what's important is still the dorsiflex, the plantar flex, but on the way down, crashing your toes and scraping the ground, not snapping your legs out. Then finally, the C skip is just a rhythmic motion of bringing your knees as high as you can from the front of your shoulder to the side of your shoulder. Moving on is the bunny hops. You want to dorsal flex on the way up and plantar flex when you strike the ground. Then quick feet. Slightly lean forward, move your feet, pump them as quick as you can. It's very simple. Continue to dorsiflex the entire time on this one as you make strikes to the ground. Lunges. When you lunge on your way up, be up tall. Practice your chin being level. Practice your arm movement and your knee drive. Then on the way down, move into your dorsal flex and your plantar flex with the 2 feet, and then continue to lunge through those. Power skips. As you jump through your power skips, just like your first phase of the long jump, get as much knee drive as you can with as much arm drive as you can, continuing to relax your face and keeping your chin level. Okay, another speed development drill you can do is called chicken hops. What you do is you stand in place, put your arms stationary, and jump straight up in the air 5 times, popping up with your knees as high as you can. As always, dorsiflex as you drive up and plantar flex on the way down. Okay, bounding. 2 types of bounding. The first one is more of a triple jump gear type of bounding for the second phase of triple jump. However, it still works using your momentum. So you want to bound, continuing to dorsiflex and plantar flex, continuing to have knee drive, and continuing to kick your arms back. However, you're going to bring your arms forward and come through the jump and pull yourself through the jump. Also, your back legs need to curl up. Maybe this makes sense. You need to curl your legs up to the point where you are in the air like this when you bound. The second type of bounding is just a standard bound for long jump, which would be one arm in front, one arm behind, continuing to be like a spring throughout the entire drill.
The long jump is broken down into 4 components, the first being the run-up, then the takeoff, then the flight, then the landing. Now within the run-up, the most important thing is consistency and being able to be on the same place on the board every time that you run down. The second most important thing is speed, the fact you must accelerate from the first point to the end point, which is the board, and your speed must be greatest at the board, so it's a gradual increase in momentum. You must also have great power and be able to convert the power from the running and the speed into the jump. In the takeoff, it's important that you are on the board. Just before this point, you go through the amortization phase, where you have a slight sink or dip of the hips, and this allows you to transfer your power or speed from the run-up into the takeoff. At this point, you have to drive your free knee or your non-takeoff leg through and forward, which helps change the momentum from horizontal to vertical. Within the flight, people have different techniques in the air. These include the hang, where you hold in a hang position in the air, the sail, where you literally sail through the air hips first, and the hitch kick, which looks like a running motion through the air. This phase is probably least important technique wise because you're actually in the air and you're just maintaining as much time as you can airborne. The landing phase is crucial, which you can gain up to 0.5 metre to 1 metre on this. This is where your leg shoot comes in. It's where you pull the heels up, you bring the head down towards the knees, and then pull the body in towards the heels as you hit the sand. This is one of the most important parts and can win or lose you a long jump competition.
All the hard work's over, now the real fun begins.
Percent hard work and 1% intelligence.
Hello, my name is Tompkins. I would like to demonstrate to you today how to use the pop-up board in the long jump. This is one of the boards that I designed, which is a long jump pop-up board that I call it. Some people probably call them lift boards, but this is it. It's really a simple little board that allows an athlete to work on his lift, the drive, and technique in flight during the long jump and the landing, particularly the extension phase prior to landing itself. And this is the board that I will demonstrate some of the techniques for you today. Okay, one of the safety issues I like to indicate to you first is that the board should not be used on a slick or wet surface. Particularly the surface that we have here today is ideal for this because it will prevent the board from sliding and slipping. One of the things that athletes have a common use of doing is planting on the edge of the board, and the process of going over or overextending on the board will cause the board to flip. This is a safety issue. So what you need to teach your athletes to do is plant here, in this angle right here. And this is the driving phase. In the actual long jump itself, the athlete will come down running, and his last step, there is a dip, then he drives up off the board. What this board allows you to do is to simulate that dipping process by driving up off the board. This is the motion that you will use. The ankle will lift you up. Let's go. Go up, up, up. Up, you're going out. Don't go out. One of the other things I like to bring to your attention is that when younger athletes and athletes plant on the board, their first notion is to drive out and try to go for distance. The board is not designed so that athletes will be able to lift off the board and work on their technique in flight. The board is not designed so that you can lift off of it and jump and try to go for distance. It's not designed for that. It's for technique. So when the athlete plants on the board, he should concentrate on going up, not trying to go out into the pit and land for distance. It's not about that. What I would like to do now at this time is demonstrate some of the series and the phases that an athlete should work on. We're going to work on number one, the lift itself, the flight, the hang, and the land. Try to jump into the pit. There you go. There you go. You got this. Bring it on. My name is Tompkins. I'm a 1985 graduate of the U.S. Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama. I graduated from Murphy High School in 1979. I was a long jumper and intermediate hurdler. At one point, I led the nation during the preseason in the 400 intermediate hurdles. In college, I also ranked nationally in the 400 hurdles and long jump. Part of my long jump training, I used the long jump pop-up board to develop my in-flight technique. I worked on my lift, flight, the landing when using the long jump board. So when using the board, there were several things that I indicated that you needed to be aware of. Number one, do not allow the athlete to plant on the top of the board, because that could cause the board to slip. By placing the foot here, it could cause the board to slip. In addition to that, do not put the board on wet surfaces or any surface that can cause the board to move itself. It should be on a firm, non-movable surface so that the athlete is able to plant and drive up off the board to work on the lift, the flight, and the extension when completing the landing. Several athletes, Anthony Carter, who was a 26, 27-foot long jumper in college, he jumped 24, 25 in high school. He went on for about a period of 4 or 5 years. He ranked nationally, and this is one of the boards that was a part of his training also. One of the other athletes was Fred Fry. He was an All-American, and he led the nation in 1978 in the long jump. Ironically, Carl Lewis was one of the individuals that he beat out that year in the indoor long jump. Probably the person that we're most familiar with is Eric Walder from Arkansas. He was a 25-foot long jumper in high school, in addition to jumping 28-foot in the long jump. So he has a pretty good history in the long jump competition. And this board here was used as part of our training at Murphy High School. We had Nalina Lofton, a female who jumped 19.3. And these boards contributed to us working on our technique and improving our long jump skills.
From the Olympic trials, Jesse's up.
Hello again from Explosive Edge Athletics. I'm Sean Mishka, Athletic Performance Director here of Explosive Edge in Edina, Minnesota, and welcome to our new home. One of the places that you'll find me here today is our new sandbox, and I'm going to have Nick quickly scroll over and show you just this little training tool that we're going to be discussing here today. It's something pretty simple that we put together, and we put together this little sandbox out of necessity. Your kids might actually have one in your backyard that you can use, or you might take your athletes anywhere from a beach standpoint or to a local park to use this very, very simple tool that I have found a lot of benefit with. Now, like I said, this tool came to us out of necessity. One of our athletes who had sustained a shin injury, major shin injury, during her spring volleyball season, came to us in the summer, and I realized that I had to still find a way to get her to jump and get a high frequency and high number of jumps, but without sustaining the eccentric loading and the stress that comes with that eccentric loading repeatedly over and over and over again, especially early in her summer. So we were able to get rid of that shin injury, but still develop the rate of force development properties that we needed from her from a jumping standpoint and get those adaptations out of her. What we have found that in short term, even though there isn't a lot of research in regards to sand vertical jumping and the responses and adaptations that can occur, what I have found through the use of myotest that we can actually change the rate of force development properties and the way that they develop force. We actually have changed their force time curves in very short periods of time by allowing their body to decrease the time to peak force. So they develop more force in less time and essentially change that force time curve so they create greater impulse output, which is a change of momentum, which is essentially what we're looking for from a jump concentric standpoint. The other added benefit to this is that what I found is that we can also more aptly teach landing mechanics, and we can do that very, very simply without them having to worry about that high volume of ground contact time. So jumping in this pit has a lot of advantages. It can be very forgiving on the joints, as well as all the connective tissue and the whole musculotendinous component that can be very, very forgiving on. So we can use to take away from that eccentric. Most people hear me talking about eccentric stress and eccentric loading all the time from a shock plyo standpoint, and even with some of our weight training movements that we use with eccentrics. But what we have found that this is a great way to transition them out of that eccentric and start to develop more force in less time and get try to change that accelerated process. What we find with the sand is, of course, it's harder to move. So the muscle actually takes more of the blunt of the movement than does the connective tissue or the tendons. But in order to move out of this sand, we can emphasize greater arm action. So if I have an athlete that has a hard time utilizing their arms when they jump, specifically on a standing vertical jump or even on their approach jump, we can start to get them to use our arm action to a greater extent to get them out of the sand. Also, like I said, because it is so concentric in nature, I have found, or it's my hypothesis of mine, that we have greater muscle fiber recruitment. But we have to be very, very careful, and I'll talk about that in a bit as far as how often we incorporate this. And another added benefit is because this sand is a very unstable surface at times and it can slip through your toes, I feel that it can really help develop the foot strength, especially those intrinsic foot muscles that sometimes don't get worked when we have a heavy shoe on, or even a shoe of any sort. So even if we were to do barefoot training, it doesn't give us quite the same effect because the body's always going to want to hold back a little bit if we're jumping on a harder surface. Now, even though it does have a great amount of advantages that I have found, it also has some disadvantages. Of course, because they're jumping in the sand and it's not as hard or compliant of a surface, is we really decrease the ability of the stress shortening cycle. There is really no stress shortening cycle taking place in this box. So it's important to distinguish between the fact that something can be plyometric versus something that's jump training. Jumping in this box is not plyometric whatsoever. And it's mostly muscular in nature. Mostly will involve the mechanics of jumping rather than the actual plyometric contribution. So we got to be careful that we don't change the way that we want the athlete to be developing force, and we don't change that motor unit recruitment to too great a degree. So that can happen very quickly in this. So we got to make sure that we only use this for very short cycles, as we would anything else. The other thing is, because it is muscular in nature, is this can be very fatiguing. So we have to be careful that we keep the reps single response, we keep long rest periods, and when I say single response, I just mean one rep at a time and then taking a short break or a short rest of maybe 5 to 10 seconds before we complete the next rep. So at that time, as a coach or as a trainer, you can get good coaching cues in and really try to teach the athlete what they should be doing, where they should be positioning their body, how they should be landing, and the like. The other thing with this box, and obviously we had to build one, but sometimes people don't have access to it. But that really becomes a moot point, being that we can find these pretty much anywhere. And this was a relatively cheap way for us to continue to have our jumping happen in that athlete that was injured. And we have started to use it with athletes that are not of an injured capacity as well. So again, how do we use it? Well, with our strength or power jumpers, if you have your athletes that are strength and power jumpers, typically we know that they put out enough power, or they jump with enough strength. So this could be a tool that could actually take them a step back as far as making them more elastic or reactive. However, in those strength and power jumpers that are very slow to still develop force, that they might reach an overall velocity at the moment of takeoff very well, but their transition period from downward to upward motion is very, very slow, or they develop force very slowly, we can start to increase those abilities like I alluded to earlier. So in strength power jumpers, that's how we use it. An elastic reactive jumper, somebody who doesn't develop force very easily, but they are very springy, bouncy, etc., we might use this type of jump application for them, but really start to load it. So we can use dumbbells, obviously, in this pit. We can also use weighted vests, and we can use that to develop more force and teach them how to essentially put out more force throughout the entire concentric end. So it really becomes very muscular based for them, especially when they're more of an elastic reactive jumper and they just need more muscular force or muscular strength. I know that this was a relatively short video that's going to try to hopefully hit home a few points that we've been using here, a couple new things. I would really implore researchers and as well as practitioners alike to start using this a little bit more and start investigating ways that we can change jumping application from this standpoint. Sean Mishka, Explosive Edge Athletics. You can find this explosiveedgeathletics.com, or feel free to give us a jingle at 952-746-9003. Any questions that you have, feel free to hit me up. If not, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.